Hare Krishna. Question. I accept the philosophy of ISKCON, but I don't believe that any organization says everything that is completely correct. I want to become devoted to ISKCON. I also am thinking of becoming a full-time devotee. But is it necessary that I should be accepting everything that is taught in its philosophy? Or if I accept majority of it and I feel that it is benefiting me and sharing that majority will benefiting others also, can I still become a serious devotee and share Krishna consciousness with others? Answer. We have to understand that first of all, it's not ISKCON's philosophy. It is the philosophy of the Shastras. ISKCON is simply teaching the philosophy that is given in the Vedic scriptures, especially the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. Secondly, when we talk about accepting everything, what it refers to is, we will look at two different attitudes in this. After Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita's Chaturshloki in 10.8 to 11, then Arjuna accepts what Krishna has said in 10.12 and 13, and then in 14 he says, Arjuna sort of 12 and 13 he reiterates Param Brahma Param Dhama, and then 12.14 he says Sarvam etadritam manye yanmam vadasi keshava Sarvam etadritam manye. I accept everything that you say, O Krishna. Now he says, I accept everything that you say. At the same time, if we will see, after the Bhagavad Gita, when the Mahabharata war starts and Abhimanyu is killed unfairly in the Chakravyuha, at that time, Arjuna is heartbroken. And in fact, there's almost there are several dozens of verses which in very heart-rending detail describe the lamentation of Arjuna. So now Krishna's message was that, be equipoised in happiness and distress. And Arjuna is devastated in distress. So has Arjuna not accepted Krishna's message? Arjuna, there are natural human emotions which come to him also. When a son dies, a father is naturally going to be a pain. But the point is, don't become overwhelmed. So Arjuna is affected by the emotions, but he's not overwhelmed. And the test of that is, he doesn't give up his service to Krishna. His service to Krishna continues. So this is one kind of what might seem lack of acceptance. That means, Krishna gives a particular standard, but one is not able to follow the standard. And because of situations, one is shaken by emotions, but overall one continues moving forward in one's path which is given by Krishna, that is the path of bhakti. So if we are not able to emotionally accept and apply certain principles, although we accept those principles to be correct, Prabhupada talks about this in the purport of 3.31. Ye me matamidam nityam anutishtanti manava shraddhavanto anasuyanto muchyante tepi karmami. There he says in the purport that as long as one is not resentful of the principle, one will make spiritual advancement even if one is not able to follow the principles right now. So that's first is emotional lack of acceptance of certain principles because of inability to follow. Second is intellectual lack of acceptance in terms of certain things being incomprehensible or inconceivable or irreconcilable. We see that the mood which the acharyas describe is just as Arjuna accepted everything that Krishna has said, we should also accept. But then the same acharyas we see elsewhere when Krishna in Govardhan Leela speaks the Karma Mimamsa philosophy. At that time, what do our acharyas say? They say that Krishna is speaking in jest. So the absolute truth may at times not speak the absolute truth. And to be in harmony with the absolute truth, we may sometimes have to reject or subordinate the words of the absolute truth. So what is the meaning over here when we say accept everything? If this statement sarvam etadritam manye, accept everything, was to be taken in terms of 100% literality, then it would imply that even when Krishna speaks something in jest, like he speaks the karma mimamsa, we would have to accept that. No, we don't accept that. Why? Because there is a hermeneutic. Hermeneutic means a system of understanding scripture. Krishna himself gives a conclusion. Vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Whereas in the Karma Mimamsa it is said God is not important, just the laws are important. And if we harmonize the laws by yajna, then there is no need for any further laws. There is no need for appeasing any god or any higher being. This is not the Vedic conclusion. So this is with respect to intellectual lack of acceptance because of irreconcilability. It's not irreconcilable, but one is a higher truth and the other is a contextual statement. So now apart from this, these are scripture examples of things which seem contradictory. What we may experience is there are certain scripture statements and there are certain statements, certain understandings which we have got from, say, our exposure to the world, our exposure to the scientific worldview. So for example, one may find it difficult to accept some fantastic seeming dimensions, say of how tall a mountain is, or there are rivers of different kinds, or certain things like that. Now we have to understand that these are not the essence of the Bhagavatam. In the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, before and after the cosmology sections, the important point that is said is, by meditating on the cosmology of the universe, one will understand the glory of the Supreme Lord and be able to fix the mind on the Supreme Lord. So it may happen that we are not able to accept the cosmology, but the purpose of the cosmological description is not just the literal description, it is a tool for meditating on the Supreme Lord. Now we have been educated in a different worldview where we think of planets and the laws of motion, the laws of gravity, laws of mechanics. Now if you look at the pioneering scientists like Newton and Copernicus, by studying the cosmology, their minds also went to the Supreme Lord. So by meditating on the cosmology as is revealed by modern science, also one can turn towards the Supreme Lord and meditate on the Supreme Lord, and that is the essential purpose. So even if one is not able to accept the Vedic Bhagavad cosmology as is described in the 5th canto, that does not necessarily mean that one is faithless. So one accepts what the scriptures say, one rejects what the scriptures says. These are two extremes. But in between there can be a state of suspended judgment. Suspended judgment means one recognizes that there are certain things which I cannot understand because my intelligence is finite, and these truths are talking from either from God's perspective or they are talking from a higher perspective, and that's why I may not be able to understand these things. So we say that this mood of Arjuna, where he asks Krishna the question, Katham etad vijaniyam tamadav proktavaniti. So in 4.4 he asks Krishna asks Arjuna, how am I to understand this? So as devotees who are trying to study the philosophy, we may often find things which we can't understand. So now the skeptical attitude would be, if I can't understand it, I reject it. It's wrong. Devotional attitude doesn't necessarily mean that I have to give up my intelligence and accept blindly whatever is said in scripture. A devotional attitude can also be balanced with a rational attitude, where we can come to a state of suspended judgment. Okay, if I read something, I put it in a sort of mental double brackets. So this is something which I don't understand. And later on, we can consult senior devotees who are experts in those particular fields, and we can get a better understanding. So it's not that just by moving a magic wand, we will be able to accept everything that is told in the scripture. Now what is told in the scripture will be understandable and acceptable to us as we study it, as our understanding deepens, and as we become purified, so that we also develop higher vision. So even if we can't accept everything that is taught in scripture, that does not make us faithless, but that does not necessarily mean that scripture is wrong or the teachings of a particular organization based on the scriptures are wrong. All that it means is currently we are not able to comprehend things. So when what we are not able to comprehend, we shouldn't speak about these things. This doesn't make sense to me, that doesn't make sense to me. We don't have to be spreaders of doubt and skepticism. We can be spreaders of wisdom, and wherever scriptural teachings are not clear to us, we can keep them, as I said, in the state of suspended judgment till we meet some senior devotees who help us to clarify the scriptural statements. And in this way, we can move towards a state of increasing understanding of scriptures, by which many of the statements which seem incomprehensible today will become comprehensible over a period of time. So in general, scriptural truths which we study can become in 4 different categories. One which is something which we hear and immediately, this is right. Something which we hear and we think, and then we analyze, we reason, then it strikes, this is correct. Something which we hear and then we have to maybe go through a lot of purification, and then we understand how it is right. And something we may never understand how it is right because it's just beyond our conception. So for example, something we hear and understand is right. We may ourselves have experienced some misery in our life and repeatedly, and the scripture says this world is dukkhalam. Yes, this is true. That means something will strike us immediately. Or something scripture say you're not the body or the soul. How is it possible? And when the body gets cut, I feel pain. It may not make sense immediately, but then we study, we think about it, we look at scientific literature about near-death experiences, past life memories, then it makes sense. Some things may take years for us to understand. For example, say how the gopis' love for Krishna is transcendental. It is not selfish, it is not material, it is how it is not like the lust of this world. It may take years for us to understand this. And if you want to look at the 5th canto cosmology, the planetarium, which we are making based on that in Mayapur. So the 5th canto cosmology, it is said that even Brahmaji does not understand the cosmology fully. So some of the devotees in the planetarium team, they joke that even if we had Brahmaji as a planetarium team member, still we would have difficulty in making the planetarium. So there are some things which we just don't understand with our finite intelligence. So we should understand that our primary conviction in scripture will come from category 1 and category 2. What we understand and strikes us as true, or what we understand after some period of time. Actually, we accept scripture because of its its theoretical as well as transformational benefits. It explains life in a broad perspective and it transforms us. Now when we go and say take allopathic medicine, it is not necessary that a person who takes allopathic medicine has to believe or accept every single proposition that is in allopathy. But as long as the person says, okay, this particular diagnosis makes sense and this prescription works for me, I can take allopathy and even I can become an allopathic doctor. I know some allopathic doctors, in fact many, they are skeptical about many of the things that go on in the name of allopathy. So it's not that one has to blindly accept everything, even in the material field of knowledge. So one accepts a material field of knowledge not because one accepts everything in it to be right, but because of its theoretical and its transformational benefits. So the same standard we can apply for scripture, and as our understanding of scripture deepens, as we become more and more purified, then we will understand that whatever we are unable to accept, that is also true from a higher perspective. So we will understand this as our consciousness evolves, and of course some things which we never understand. So as long as we are convinced about the core principles of scripture, those which explain life in a broad perspective and those which enable us to make ourselves better human beings and enables others to become better, then that is what is primarily giving us conviction, and that is what can give others conviction. That will not benefit us, that will benefit others. Whether this particular mountain is 10,000 yojanas or 1000 meter or 1000 meters, it is not going to make any difference when we die and go from this body to the next body. If we go back to the spiritual world or not, that is going to make a big difference. And that will depend on how much attraction to Krishna we have developed. And that attraction to Krishna and that detachment from selfish material enjoyment, that is something which is a repeatable, demonstrable teaching of scripture. Now, there are thousands of people all over the world who have experienced this benefit, and we can experience this and we can share this benefit with others. So as long as we are accepting the core principles, then we can always practice and share Krishna consciousness with others, and whatever doubts we have, we don't have to publicize those doubts or reservations, but through the appropriate forums with the specific learned devotees, specialized learned devotees, we can get those doubts addressed. Thank you. Hare Krishna.